as a child, as a student, I wasn't a writer. In fact, I feared it. And I might get one sentence down and I would watch all the children around me writing all kinds of things, full pages, going on to the second page, and if in a 40-minute period I had that much written, I was lucky.
So we're here today with Wilf Pauls, and we're going to talk about Wilf's work, his writing work, and other meanderings, which are going to be fun. So welcome here, Wilf.
Thank you, thank you.
It's great to see you. Can we just start by, I'd love to hear something about you, your life, your family and whatever, where you fit in the world.
Well, yes, we've been really fortunate to have the experiences we've had. I was born in Saskatchewan at the age of about 7. We moved to Kelowna, BC, graduated out of Rutland Secondary, ended up taking my training a bit of Okanagan College and UBC in Vancouver. I met Pearl back here in Kelowna as I was at university, and it was amazing. She was young, she was a piano player, I was a guitar player, and lo and behold, we went on a trip with a youth group, and that was the beginning of what's now 49 years of being married. Wow. We've got 3 children, and they live in Kelowna here. We've got 6 grandchildren, and seems like every one of them loves the idea of stories, which is my life. I grew up in a family where my mom told stories all the time, and so that's become part of my background. We've lived all over the world. I started my teaching career back here in South Rutland Elementary. It was interesting. I had an administrator who said, "You know, Wilf, I love having you in my school, but it'd be good for you to see the world. I'll give you a good recommendation anywhere you want to go." Little did we know that we'd end up in Watson Lake, Yukon within 2 years. And as I was teaching in Watson Lake, the assistant superintendent, he was a Scottish guy, and Bill Ferguson came to me and he said, "Wilf, how'd you like to be the principal of Old Crow?" And I didn't even know where Old Crow was. Had to go 300 miles to Whitehorse, 500 miles up to Old Crow, 800 kilometers. It's up over the Arctic Circle. And so Wilf and Pearl, at the tender age of 26 and 21, went up to Old Crow, where I taught grade 4 to 6 one year, grade 4 to 7 the other. From there we launched off. We sort of did something we never planned to do. We said we never really want to go to Europe as tourists. We couldn't stand that mentality living up in Old Crow. Little did I know. I just did an application out of a lark to go to DND, the Department of National Defense, in Germany, and I got a 2-year stint over in Lahr, Germany for 2 years. Came back to Canada, taught in Mile 108 Elementary for 8 years. That's where I began. Well, I tried a few things. Grade 6, grade 4, 5, grade 3 I'd never taught before, so let's try that. And then the library opened up. Amazing. 5 years, teacher librarian. And we had a conference over in the church where we had a fellow from Minneapolis, Minnesota show up. He came to our place for dinner, and he said, "We have a school in Zaire. We need an emergency science teacher for junior high. Can you do that?" And I said, "Sure." We had 3 children, grade 6, grade 4, and grade 1. We went to Africa for 1 year. We wanted to stay longer if we could, but we also had the chance maybe to go to an international school in Thailand. That didn't work out because their mailing to me never reached us, so that didn't work out. We had to come back to Canada. So I couldn't teach in British Columbia because I'd bought myself out, and so government money paid my way to Africa. Came back, I ended up becoming the director of Garden Lake Bible Camp for 3 years, and also taught part-time school at that point. Yeah. From there I went back into the Shuswap, became teachers of all kinds of schools, music specialist, then classroom teacher, and then back to being a teacher librarian for about 20 years, 25 years. And so that launched my writing. And so I think that's a bit of background that.
Wow, that's fantastic. I had no idea, to be honest, that you had such a rich experience of travel and teaching and stuff. Amazing.
Yeah,
so,
you don't get rich, but you get rich.
Yeah, rich in different ways.
Yeah.
Now, writing, obviously you've been surrounded with books, but what was the inspiration for yourself to get into writing books yourself? How did you get into that?
It's a bit of a lead up to that really good question, because as a child, as a student, I wasn't a writer. In fact, I feared it. Anytime a teacher would say, okay, we're going to do a paragraph or we're going to write a story, I thought, oh no, here we go again. And I was the kid who would sit at the desk and think and think. And I might get one sentence down and I would watch all the children around me writing all kinds of things, full pages, going on to the second page, and if in a 40-minute period I had that much written, I was lucky. And looking back, I tried to figure out, where did that change? I think I know. When I was at UBC and Pearl was in Kelowna, no texts, no cell phones, no computers, we had to write each other letters. We miss that today, because that's what I think ignited my writing. Because on Friday nights, I would make it a date with Pearl, and I would sit down and I would write her the events of the week. It ended up being stories. And I would just write pages, 3 pages, 4 pages, and I'd send it off to her. And I started to love it. And then when I became a teacher, I needed scripts for my puppet plays or for readers' theater, and I would start to write those. And I found pleasure in that. And then when I started teaching in Bastion Elementary, which was back in the early 2000s, I thought, this is a crazy school for hockey and for basketball. There were not that many children's hockey books. And I thought, we need a fresh one. And so one day I was at Chapters here in Kelowna. We were living in Enderby. Drove to Kelowna for Christmas and stopped at Chapters before we went for supper over at Pearl's parents' place. And as I was looking at some books in Chapters, I found one that had an interesting pattern. And I said, if that guy can sell that book and sell it on me, I can do the same thing, except I'll make a hockey book out of it. And so that started me off, a book for my specific school. Well, I was teaching in 2 schools at that time, both of those schools, and I can practice it on these kids. And so maybe I can take a look at that book and show you
That'd be great.
that hockey book.
Yeah.
Thanks. So this book opened that whole door of presenting something to a group of people. I was teaching 19 classes between 2 schools. So guess what? I got to practice this in front of kindergarten all the way up to grade 7, besides doing hockey activities. This book tied into, we played table hockey in the library. I made little goals and taped tape on the floor so kids would play table hockey on the floor. We did shootouts. We did the impossible shot. We did all sorts of hockey activities, and I would read other hockey stories, but this was the anchor. And at the end of that ended up being 2 months of hockey in the library, doing all kinds of skills like mapping skills, everything else. We did all of that around it. Then we read this story.
Wow.
And I said to the children, I want you to critique it. You can tell me anything you want, good, bad, or ugly, whatever you like, whatever you didn't understand. And so look how many editors I had. Yeah. Plus, had you been living near me at that point, if you came to my house, I would have said, Graham, could you please read this story to me? So you'd read it out loud to me, and I want you to know that that's the scariest thing.
Right.
I can read the story out loud to you and I know what I want, but when you read it to me,
Yeah.
it changes everything. Because you've got your life that you've lived and you're going to interpret it maybe differently.
Yeah.
So is this effective? Does this story work? And I can tell you, it works.
Yeah.
We've tried it out now with thousands of kids and they've loved it.
It's amazing. What's the premise of that story? What's it about?
This is the story of a child. Well, first of all, you know how parents think their children can do anything. You know, they walk at 9 months, or they started doing, and we're all proud of our children.
Yeah.
And so I play on that, and I say, okay, this child can do anything. I mean, this is a total tall tale, the biggest tall tale you can ever imagine. I mean, this child wants to go to college when they're a couple of days old. They're doing all kinds of crib exercises. The story goes on about that ridiculous thing, and of course then the child eventually gets to play in the Olympics and has to rest in between, have naps in between practices, is protected from the paparazzi, and so we throw those kind of goofy things in, and at the end of the game he scores the winning goal. He's the goalie and he scores the winning goal.
As the goalkeeper?
This is the goalkeeper, yes. And you'd figure that he would be thrilled, but no. He looks at all these different people in the audience, the reporters. He even looks at Ron McLean, you know, from CBC. He looks at all, and the Olympic president. And at the end of all that, something's wrong, and he's mumbling. Finally, they get him to say what he's mumbling. And what does he holler? I want my mommy. Because what does every child want? A relationship with somebody who's important. And of course, mommy comes crowd surfing, picks him up, and at the end of the story, he's back with his mommy. Except I have a little twist at the end, which I'm not going to tell you. Because he does something special other than just play hockey at the end. So that was the first book that I actually published. The kids in Bastion said, you have to do one on basketball, because this is a crazy school for hockey and basketball.
Yeah.
And so that became my next book, Baby Braun, Basketball Superstar.
So that's fantastic, Wilf, it really is. So those books are very fictional, you obviously,
Yes.
but they're taking life events, but,
Yes.
but they're fictional. Now your latest book, I believe, is more of,
Yes.
a story based on your life. Maybe we could give you that book.
In fact, bring the last three. The last, not the basketball one. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear what you've been doing in recent times, and,
Yes.
and you know.
It's interesting how sometimes you have a throwback to years before. I'd like to mention this book because this book is really quite effective and very helpful for kids who are struggling, kids who've been bullied, kids who have been the weaker one in a crowd. And back in the 90s, I was teaching a grade 7 class, and I read picture books to kids in grade 7.
Yeah.
I would read picture books to adults. I really recommend it because they teach good stuff. And we read a story where a character in that story had trouble with the letter R. It was called Huey for Wadney Wat. I read it to the grade 7s, and I said to them as an assignment, I'd like you to write down all the words you possibly can where you have trouble with the letter R and change it to another letter like a W or an L or change it. So out of that, I have the list, the original list in my files, and I show this to children in school. Huge long list of words that you can play with. At the end of that day, I said to them, just not knowing where this was going, I said, I just might use this list and write a book. Guess what? Fweddy the Wed Fwog Quince came out of that, and I can thank those grade 7s in Salmon Arm Elementary, a school that's now closed. I can thank those kids for some of that inspiration. Children inspire me all the time. I get an adrenaline rush with that. And so Fweddy the Wed Fwog Quince ended up being a book where this frog gets bullied because he can't say the letter R. As soon as I introduced that in schools, the children are coming up to me afterwards saying, I can't say the letter ah. Oh, It's so hot. All kinds of things like that. And so this frog, of course, gets bullied, and I won't spoil the ending for you, but my illustrator was Myron Bourne, who has illustrated for Disney, Warner Brothers, all kinds of, he's made over 200 videos on some of his graphic design stuff. He did everything on the computer. I never had one face-to-face conference with him. He did everything, sent it to me. My son Brendan did the graphic design and put it all together for us. So that's not a true story, but does it ever hit true to life?
Yeah.
It's a precious story.
Yeah, it's good.
The story that I've told around campfires, the library, classrooms, all over the place, the most effective story I've ever told is the baseball bat. And this is a story where I was very far from perfect. At the age of 7, I was coming home from school in Kelowna here. We had just moved to Kelowna from Saskatchewan. I was coming home and I saw a baseball bat lying on the far corner of the schoolyard. You know, I never planned to steal it. My parents never taught me to steal. I was an honest boy. But that's the basis of this book, The Baseball Bat, a true story. How do you deal with it when you get away with something that you never even intended to do in the first place? And this has opened up incredible conversations. I do author visits for 45 minutes to an hour with this, telling stories about how stealing is part of our culture now. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that yourself? How did I get over this? Because I got away with it. My brother didn't know. In fact, my brother didn't know till 2019 that I'd stolen that bat. I published this book in 2023, I guess. And so I told this story around the Christmas time with the big family thing just to entertain the children. And my brother, who played baseball with me all the time, said, I didn't know. I didn't know that bat got stolen. And then it got lost. So now I had a lost bat with a guilt conscience. How do you deal with that? And so hopefully this gives children and adults hope that you can deal with that and get rid of that guilt. So I really enjoyed putting this together. I used my own grandchildren in this book. My own grandson, I waited till he turned 7 years old because that's how old I was. His cousin Bryce was 9, which was the same age as my brother Reuben, and Hudson's sister Olivia was 10, which was about my sister's age, Olive, my older sister. And so it was really kind of cool. Yeah. My daughter Saya became the mother in the story, and I was very thankful for a teacher and the principal of Marjock Elementary who acted as the principal and the teacher of the book. So I have real characters, and I didn't have to go the illustration route. So.
Yeah, right, yeah. You used pictures even of some of those people in it.
In fact, I've got the picture of the original field of theft. Yeah, it's there.
Oh, wow.
Anyways,
that's beautiful. Well,
it's really good to have a true story to share with kids. The goofy stories are just as effective, but this one really touches our hearts.
So I just want to ask you, you're obviously inspired to keep going in your writing and keep doing what you do, and you're not living in the past of that, which is really good. Right. And I know you have another book here that's not even a book yet, or whatever, yes. But maybe you could tell us some of your dreams for future ideas that you might have or whatever, without giving away all the stories.
It's absolutely amazing when you start writing. I'm sure with music it's the same. You have some times where you don't do much, but then when it starts, it really flows.
Yeah.
And so I've done my memoirs, 262-page memoirs, where I put a lot of stories together, which can become, I don't know, I can break out and do more stories beyond those. But this particular story, The Crokinole Kid, this is the only copy of this. I've shared this story with thousands and thousands of children when I do something called a games project, where I bring real games, non-digital to schools, games like crokinole, table hockey, pitch nut, which is a French-Canadian version of the Indian game carom, and another game called Schulbach, which is a Dutch game. And I can fill up a whole gym. 64 kids can play all at the same time. I teach them how to play these games. They play, they learn how to win, they learn how to lose. At the end of it all, I gather them back together, and I put this on a screen. I've got it on my thumb drive. And I share this story. And it's a true story of another grandson of mine who, when he was 11, I took him to the BC Crokinole Championships. Now, Pearl and I have gone to the BC Crokinole Championships for years, and I said to him, would you like to be my partner? I don't care if we come last. I would just love you to experience a tournament where you play with other people. Well, expecting to come not too good in the lineup, we ended up getting, well, I better not tell you, because it's in the story. we sort of shaped it after the Crokinole Kid. No, after the, what am I saying? After the Karate Kid. And so I called it the Crokinole Kid, and it's really fun to talk about that because when I do this with schools, I show them pictures of the Karate Kid and how we put that title page together. And it's kind of just a sweet twist. But it really inspires children. I've seen children at the Crokinole, table hockey, all those events saying things like, this is better than video games. And I say, I don't put video games down. Video games are part of our life. But let's say that some of these traditional games shouldn't be lost as well. So that's what this book is about.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it's been really inspiring to hear your stories, Wilf, it really has. And we're thankful that you're part of the community here and part of Metro Creative as a community. And we really want to encourage you to keep writing these books, and we look forward to many more of them. You know what I mean? It's been fantastic to have you.
Thank you. I should tell you one really sweet thing that happened that kind of inspires a person to continue on. I have submitted a couple of my stories to the BC Teacher magazine, older kind of stories, and I got an email yesterday from the editor saying that they're going to print one of those stories in the fall edition of the BC Retired Teachers Association magazine, which goes out to about 16,000 teachers. And it's an exciting thing to share these stories. It was a story actually from UBC days, and so that ties right into the education system.
Wow.
Never saw that coming, but hey, a guy who sat there in grade 3 and couldn't write a thing should give hope to anybody in the world.